The other one is room for expansion. You mean expansion in the future servers, or the company may hire more people in the future? Easy physical access. Okay. Yeah, those are all great reasons, right? But let's consider from the IT person, if you are the IT person of the company. For traditional company, the IT department is fairly small, right? So your goal is not to earn money for the company, right? Instead, your goal is to make everything go smoothly, right? So you are a cost sector. And if someone complains that it's not very easy to use, or the latency is high, right, you may be criticized by your manager, which may or may not understand the IT part, right? As a result, what you want to do, you want to do more conservative, right? To purchase more server, right? In case something bad happens, or to allow the room for future growth. Or you want to be more aggressive to save the cost, but make the utilization higher. Sometimes we may have higher latency when everyone is using that, or we may have more employees, right? We may have a slowed system. Which one we want to do? Right? I think it's very clear that you will take the conservative approach, because if you increase the utilization, you may have some risks. Of course, you save some resources and save some cost, but the cost won't be on your own paycheck. Right? So you won't be appreciated much by saving the cost. But whenever there is some risk happen, you will be criticized a lot. Therefore, it is very common, and from that perspective, rational to say the IT people often over provision for the resources, which we see in many other places as well. Right? So it's not because the IT person is not professional enough, they do not have the required knowledge and techniques. It's the incentive, the system, basic incentive-wise, to be more conservative, right, in doing this. This happens again when we want to move into the cloud, right? Because as you know, if they move into the cloud, they may need fewer employees to manage the local data center, right? So let's say if you now have 3 full-time employees to manage the local computer room, then if you move into the cloud, you only need one of them. Now try to ask them, right, whether they recommend you to move into the cloud, because those people are the expert in the company. I think you can expect to receive a lot of pushback from the expert, right? Because if you actually move into the cloud, right, 2 out of the 3 employees will lose their jobs. right? So that partially explains why for traditional companies, it's very hard to move into the cloud. You need the company management level to understand the IT level, which is hard because it's not an IT company. Right? And to move into the cloud, there are some challenges. For example, some data, if you don't manage them carefully, right, you may actually leak the data, which is a big issue compared to the cost you save. Also, when something goes wrong, now it's in the cloud, you need to collaborate with Amazon folks to fix it, which may be even harder than to manage it locally. Right? So during the transition stage, there will be actually more problems than fewer. Right? So that creates a lot of challenges. So you rely on those experts to help you to make the transition. But after you finish transition, you may fire some of them. Right? Now you can see why it's so challenging. Right? But if we don't make that happen, the problem is that the localization is still lower. Okay, like this. Right. So why we cannot improve the localization to 100%, right? Because that's the best we can do. We already purchased a server. Why not? I just use it fully. The reason is that first, there is dyno, weekly, monthly, those patterns in customers' use. If you are a company, you may expect people use the computers more during the day, during the office hours, versus during night. Even for Google, the big challenge for them is that their peak to mean ratio can be as high as 5 to 7. But they need to provision based on the peak instead of the mean, right? Because they cannot say, now it is a peak, for example, during the Thanksgiving, but suddenly I don't have enough resource. I can only serve 20% of the customers. And then I think if Google decided to do that, their stock price will be way lower than what it is now. So instead, they need to provision based on the peak. Basically means even during the Christmas or Thanksgiving, they can serve all the customers. The problem is that with that huge capacity, during normal days, especially during early morning, almost no one uses the system. So there is a valley, as we show here. Those are the periods we have very low utilization. Why? Because customers, users don't want to do that. So what can we do? In some cases, we can mitigate that. Facebook uses a geographic multiplexing. If they combine both the customers from the Europe and the United States, they can increase the utilization because of the time difference. However, this increases the delay. If you want to serve the European customers in United States data center, you have increased latency. Other approach, like Google, they will run some back-end applications, for example, indexing and the page rank during night when the utilization is low, right? So basically means they have some flexibility in time, right? Some jobs, you can run that during the day, you can run them during the night, then run them during the night when the other applications like a search is high. Because for searching, there is not much flexibility in time. Right? For each search, Google requirement is that they need to finish the calculation within 200 milliseconds or even lower. But for indexing, right, whether you do it during the day or during the night, does not make a much difference. As long as you finish it in several days, every several days, that is okay. Right. So it is also common for the companies to run those page-roll or run other applications during the night, right? Just to increase the utilization by feeding the values. Okay. So there are other reasons, right, for the low utilization. That is, the demand can increase over time. Right. For example, if your utilization is something like this, right? This is great for the company, right? But if you expect this, you need to provision around here, right? Which makes the early days, if this is 1 year, so that means during the first half of the year, your utilization is very low. So those are all the reasons. On the other side, right, for cloud providers, they have the luxury that they have many, many users. And each user may have a different pattern. And by combining them together, then that can reduce, right, the peak to mean ratio, because not everyone have the peak at the same time. This is the first advantage of cloud providers. The second advantage is that the cloud providers can prioritize. For example, in AWS, they have some instance called support instance. I explained last time. The support instance is that when the system is busy, those instances can be put on hold. If everyone is using that system, the utilization is high, or if the utilization is low, then we will run them. This actually creates a lot of flexibility in time that they can use to fill the values. Right. So, and for the growth, right, some companies are growing while others are more or less the same, and many others are dying. Right. So combining them together, they also is more or less similar. Right. So that's why, right, the cloud provider can utilize those advantages to improve their own utilization. As the utilization is higher, they can provide the service at a lower price, which makes them more competitive. Here you see the advantage of the scale. Right. So basically, there are 3 big players. Amazon basically still dominant. Azure maybe 1/4, and Google, despite all its past history, is still a small fraction. Right. So there are rarely other